This is probably the one goal I've set at the beginning of the year, this year for BookTube, as well as my reading, that I've actually stuck to. And it just turned into a goal of reading Jane Austen for the year, and I've completed it before the end of the year. So we're here to talk about my thoughts and opinions of the principal works of Jane Austen. Welcome back to another video. Today is going to be like a chat or wrap-up video. I mentioned in the intro that I made a goal of reading more classics this year, which turned into just reading more Jane Austen this year. I did throw in a couple of the kids classics. I have some Penguin children's classics. So I read a couple of those like Charlotte's Web and Secret Garden this year. And the rest of my classics ended up being Jane Austen. And I mentioned in one of my videos I might do a chat about it, and the feedback was really good. So I decided to do a chat about what I thought about the principal works of Jane Austen. Before picking up these books, I probably saw a movie adaptation, I think, of all of them. The only movie I did not finish watching of one is Mansfield Park, because I didn't enjoy it. But I've seen a movie adaptation of all of these at least fully, and so I had the stories in my mind of what was going to happen, but I wanted to give a go and read the books and get the full story of how Jane Austen wrote the story, and maybe even compare to how well we adapt these into the movies. So out of her 6 principal works, I'm going to rate my least to most favorite. I kind of have a top 3 and then a bottom 3 because it was hard for me to rate them, and there's just different factors as to why I placed certain books where they were on the list, and also just talk about what I liked about them, what I didn't like about them, and maybe even just chat about some of the movie adaptations I've seen, and just let you guys know what I thought about it. Out of the 6 books, my least favorite was not Emma, which I did rant about Emma, but after reading all 6 of them and kind of thinking about it, I think Mansfield Park was my least favorite just because it was the most boring out of the 6 and most anticlimactic, and the ending was just blah. It was just this, I realized that I had the person that best loves me the whole time. It was in front of me, and then we got married. And that's probably my biggest complaint about maybe all of these. At some point there's just the, oh, then they realized they loved each other and got married. Like, it didn't flesh it out and really wrap up that romance, and that definitely happened with Fanny Price and what's his name, Edmund. And I was not keen on Edmund. I was just like, you're boring. It wasn't my favorite. For all of these books, I still rated them really high. The writing is still really, really good. I think I rated this at a 3 or a 4-star rating, so I couldn't complain about the writing ever. The only thing I could complain about is maybe some of the characters and some of the lack of description, or the way she wrapped up her endings really fast, was probably my only complaints about most of these. Other than that, her writing is superb. Conversations are amazing. Her female characters, they all have something different about them, but they're all kind of around the same vein. Fanny was just someone who had a lot of conviction and great morals, and she just stuck to her guns and just kept true to herself without falling into, and then when she did kind of fall into what she thought wasn't good, she felt really bad about it and wanted to fix what she did and correct that. My next least favorite was Persuasion, and this one just annoyed me again with the romance of just this miscommunication trope that I really hate those, of just, will you talk to the woman or will you talk to the man and let him know what is going on instead of just assuming the wrong thing? And that just irritated me, but that's just a me thing. That's not anything wrong with the book. I just don't like that trope. I also hated Anne Elliot's family. They were terrible to her. But of course, just having her kind of overcome that is also a great testament to her character. So it was interesting to see her character grow through that. But it wasn't, you know, my favorite of the romances. Also, like, the romance was so blah. The movies have made it more entertaining for me. There was one movie adaptation that I saw of the BBC that was awful, because when they finally realized they're still in love with each other, the kiss took 5 minutes. Not like the actual kissing part, but the leaning in to each other to kiss took 5 minutes of switching between her perspective, his perspective, her perspective, his perspective, outside perspective of getting closer. Like it was the most annoying adaptation ever. Like I just sat there like really awkwardly watching these people like for 5 minutes lean in for a kiss. So I don't recommend that adaptation. The one I have seen, I will leave like the IMDb link or the photo up here, because before filming this video I didn't look up which edition that was and which studio did it or who's in it, so I'll leave that linked. But that one was a lot better. In fact, it's my mom's favorite movie. She watches this like 80 times and she loves Persuasion, the movie. So when we talked about the book and the movie, she's like, that's not how it goes. I'm like, that's how it went in the book. They just changed it but she's arguing with me of that's not how it goes. And I'm like, this is the source. But, you know, she loves that movie. Last out of my bottom 3 is Emma by Jane Austen. I know this is several people's favorite one. This was the most infuriating cast of characters. So this was not a favorite one for me. I like it better than the previous 2 because it had more interesting characters and a more interesting cast of characters, and it just kept things interesting. The story moved along a lot better. It wasn't boring. It didn't get bogged down, and I felt like Mansfield Park and Persuasion kind of dragged, but Emma it kind of kept things going. What I didn't like was the exasperating cast of characters and how annoying they were, but I also really didn't like Emma as a character. She was a brat, and she got away with being a brat. And she got into a lot of trouble, and she's sitting there stressing out of how to fix it, and then situations just work themselves out, so she didn't actually have to deal with the problem. Emma never has to actually face consequences and deal with any problems that she created, which I found was really annoying. And she did not deserve Mr. Knightley, although I really did like him. I mean, the two of them together are really nice because he does balance out her obnoxiousness, but it just felt like he could have done better. But I guess in the end, they did end up with who they're supposed to be. But it was just an infuriating story of just annoying characters. But it was still highly entertaining. Like, I give it props of, there was a laugh out loud moments that I found was kind of funny. There was moments where I'm cringing with the characters. So just being pulled in emotionally with the story is why it's higher rated for me. So yeah, probably not a lot of things in here that I liked about it, but for the emotional experience and the experience overall of reading this book, I had a lot of fun with it. So it is higher up there than the other 2 on my bottom 3. Into my top 3, I had to throw in Sense and Sensibility because I adore that movie so much with Emma Thompson and Kate Winslet and the late Alan Rickman as Colonel Brandon. Oh, he did such a good job as that character. I think he portrayed Brandon better in the movie than I liked of Brandon in the book, or I liked movie Brandon so much that I was disappointed with book Brandon because Alan Rickman did such a good job of being a Colonel Brandon. So that was like my one disappointment, was just like, he's not Alan Rickman as Colonel Brandon. That was my one thing of having seen a movie before the book. Overall, though, this was just a really entertaining read. I loved the characters. I loved, like, you still get those really exasperating, annoying characters, but then you have, like, the other characters that aren't as, like, obnoxious, that kind of tone them down. And it's a good blend of characters in here, and I really liked that. I loved the relationship between all 3 of the sisters and their mother. I also liked how their mother kind of made you feel like she was this common sense kind of take after her girl's mother, but then she also just emotionally flew off the handle at the same time. So she was a fun character. For Mary Ann, though, for me, this was another case of just quickly wrapping up a romance, because we focus a lot more on Mary Ann's emotions and romance and just how young she is and getting carried away. We didn't focus as much on Eleanor in the book, but you get more of a Eleanor's happily ever after developed at the end, and then Mary Ann's is that convenient, oh, and then they got married kind of thing. So I was kind of disappointed with that, but then again, in the movie, you get more of Mary Ann's ever after than you did of Eleanor's ever after. But I felt like the movie did that better because we focused more on Mary Ann's issues in both the movie and the book than we did with Eleanor's. Eleanor's was kind of behind the scenes, like a secondary story, but it still blended into the full story. But that was, again, I think she does this with most of her characters, is just, and then they got married and it turned out okay. And I'm like, I wanted a little bit more, just a bit more. Northanger Abbey is the only book out of all 6 of these that I have read twice, once physically and also once via audiobook. The rest of these are all my first read through via audiobook because I love Northanger Abbey. I loved the character of Catherine. She was adorable, relatable. I loved her sense of imagination and the trouble it got her in. She's a very unique Austen character, and I think she's a very underrated Austen character, which is why she's high on my list. Also, even after reading both Pride and Prejudice and Northanger Abbey, I still love Mr. Tilney more than I love Mr. Darcy. He was a fantastic character. He didn't make fun of Catherine the way some of the other men or other characters made fun of Catherine for liking her novels. He didn't, just assume things and push her around. He was fun, almost kind of nerdy, but sweet. Like, he was just a really interesting character, especially for like the main male character. I just really loved their banter, and their conversations that they had were some of my favorite. So Mr. Tilney is definitely high up there for Austen men. In fact, he's probably my favorite Austen male character. As for the movie adaptation, I love the adaptation with Felicity Jones and the Masterpiece Theater edition. I love that Mr. Tilney. I don't remember the actor's name because, again, I did not look this up before I filmed this video, but he's also in Austenland. He's like the main love interest in Austenland, and I remember sitting there watching that with my mom. I'm like, oh my gosh, he is Mr. Tilney. And she's like, what are you going on about? I'm like, he is an actual Austen character. And he's like pretending to be an Austen character in Austenland, but he actually was an Austen character. He did such a good job in both films that I really, really liked him as Mr. Tilney. And he has like this really cute, quirky smile that he brought to the character that made that interaction with him and Felicity Jones very sweet. So it was my favorite of the movie adaptations, as well as my favorite book for our favorite heroine and favorite love interest. They are my OTP. I ship them. They are my Austen OTP. Last but certainly not least is Pride and Prejudice. I left this one for last because it's like everybody's favorite Austen book. Everybody talks about Jane Austen. There's so many adaptations of Pride and Prejudice that I was holding off because I wanted to give the other books a go at being better or at being my favorite. Northanger Abbey and Pride and Prejudice are probably tied for me, but oh my goodness, you guys, this one was so good. I was not prepared of how good the book was going to be. Like, it was good. I was holding off on, making this the favorite because this is the most hyped out of the series, and I didn't want the hype to kind of take over of what I actually thought. But this was so good. The characters, again, you have those obnoxious characters that are balanced out by the calmer characters. I think this one had the best developed story and had everybody, like, just the flow of the story. Nothing was kind of left behind. As for the endings, they did a little bit have that and then they got married wrapped up really well kind of feel to them. But for Pride and Prejudice and Northanger Abbey, I felt like their endings were very well done with completing that and bringing the characters together for both Jane and Lizzie in here, because you had, again, 2 main love stories going, and I think they were just really well wrapped up together. And I ended up loving this, and I can see why people love this. The writing, the characters, the wit and the banter and the humor is subtle, and the drama, like, it was very well done. As for a movie adaptation, I have only ever seen the 2005 Keira Knightley version, and I love that version. I forget the actor's name again, but he played, it's on the tip of my tongue, but the guy who played Mr. Darcy did a brilliant Mr. Darcy. He was amazing. I have not seen the BBC miniseries with Colin Firth, And to be honest, I'm not inclined to see it. So please don't kill me in the comments. I just have no interest in seeing it. And it's like a 5-part miniseries or something. I don't even know how long that one is, but I'd rather watch the 2005 Keira Knightley, which is like, I don't know, 2 hours or something. I'd rather watch that because I felt like it condensed the story properly and gave a good nod to Pride and Prejudice. So yeah, I know the Austen fanatics are probably upset, but I'm probably not going to be watching the BBC version. I'm sorry. Please don't hurt me. So in conclusion, and I hope this video isn't too long, but in conclusion, Northanger Abbey and Pride and Prejudice are my top 2 favorite Jane Austen novels. Would I reread any of these? Probably. Definitely Sense and Sensibility and maybe even Emma. Probably not Mansfield Park and Persuasion. I read them. They're done. But these two, I've already reread Northanger Abbey, but these will be rereads for me. These are phenomenal books, and I am a huge Jane Austen fan of just her writing, and, you know, I'd love to go to a Regency ball. I really would. I had this vision. I was like, I want to go, but, you know, probably not going to happen. So let me know in the comments below, are you guys a Mr. Darcy fan, a Mr. Knightley fan, or are you a Mr. Tilney fan? Because I think he needs more love. Also, let me know in the comments below what your favorite book out of the Jane Austens are, or your favorite movie adaptation. Feel free to let me know down below, and like I said, don't hurt me because I'm not watching the BBC one with Colin Firth. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!